Hello everyone, I'm ClericofMadness, the founder of the Creepypasta Wiki, here with my friend Nick.
Hello, I have the better side of the microphone because I own this microphone.
We could have used mine, but I'm far too lazy. We're here to talk about the Slenderman trailer and the nonsense that is.
Well, essentially our entire thoughts are pretty much everyone else's except for vastly different reasons, I think. Let's go with yours. Let's go with your thoughts first, because you are the creepypasta man, as it were.
The creepypasta something or other. I saw the trailer, and that could not be a more generic Sony movie if it tried. The little random baby crying, the everything about it. Like, I'm sure I've seen those visuals in at least 2 other horror movies that I have sitting in the hundreds on my shelf alone. Like, it looks like it's going to be generic paint-by-numbers horror, just from the word go.
I mean, that's kind of a given, sort of in the horror movie genre. I don't know, a lot of horror movies just feel like they're just paint-by-numbers anyway.
I mean, I can't wait for the first 5 minutes of the movie when we see full-view Slenderman and all sense of tension, and it just rides off into the sunset on a shooting star. Goodbye!
The thing about it is, when I first looked at the trailer, I genuinely thought it's like they talked about like children just don't go missing like that, and I thought it's like they're actually doing a little bit of an attempt to do Slenderman, and then I saw the and they kept going with it, and I was like, okay, they've got some, they're still holding on to it, it's fine, and then they do the jump scare, and the trailer is like up, and there it goes off on a shooting star, much like you said earlier.
And I'm sure, like any other good Sony trailer, it showed us the best bits of that movie already. Because movie trailers for horror movies these days, like to spoil the entire thing, like it was, the trailer for it was basically the highlights reel of that movie.
It's kind of the reason I just don't bother watching that many movies these days. And if I do, it's going to be very special exceptions, or when you tell me, hey, I want to watch a terrible movie, let's go to the movie theater.
Or Goodwill so I can buy another one.
Amongst the shelves that you already have.
I think I have like almost closing in on 200. I might have like 150, 110, something like that. It's a ridiculous amount. I collect terrible horror movies.
If only you, the audience, all 2 of you, could see his shelf.
Whew, it is like a testament to bad horror movies. I could see like Death Tunnel and My Bloody Valentine, and I think I bought a shark movie that just looked just terrible. God bless.
I almost thought it was Sharknado, but then I realized no, it wasn't. It was the other one of the terrible rip-offs of that movie that was already terrible to begin with, so it's just kind of adding on top of terrible. I want to keep it... It's like you said you want to keep this PG, and I'm having a very hard time just keeping my mouth shut here.
Well, I mean, PG in a relative sense. We can say dirty words, gosh darn it. Fucking hell, gosh darn it.
Oh my god.
But yeah, Slenderman looks like it's going to be generic, paint by numbers, and from what I've been reading online, that really upset me, if upset is the word, but like, made me slap my face in just disappointment, was the fact that, like, the father of one of the girls that was involved in the Slenderman stabbing incident a couple of years ago claimed that it was going to be related to that, which I really hope it isn't, because that's not what you want.
The thing of it is, I don't believe that it is going to be involved in that. And honestly, I couldn't think of a reason why they would want it to be. I mean, if you're talking about like a serious thing like that, it doesn't work for a horror movie, especially one with like actual supernatural creatures. Like, granted, I could feel the concept of like some outside force possessing you to kill your family members. However, I don't think it would be a specific reference to that, and I'm not sure why they would put it in there to begin with.
I mean, it's very clearly in the woods. Like, I mean, original Slenderman kind of was more in a woods than most X-Threads these days on in a woods, but like he claims, and I can't verify this because nobody's seen anything more of this than just just a generic horror movie trailer.
It comes off to me as if they took all the because the woods feel more like the 8 pages of Slenderman. It feels like they basically took all the best bits of Slenderman and put them together in one movie.
Both of them?
Both of them. The exactly 2 that there are out there.
Because, I mean, Sony, what other thing could you be cashing in on? A meme story from over 10 years ago? You missed the boat on that one. That one sailed and circumnavigated the globe and come back laden with exotic spice.
It is not only circumnavigated the world, it is circumnavigated into visual medium ad nauseum.
I'm just hoping that they're going for the Creepypasta cinematic universe and we get to see Jeff the Killer at the end of it. I will
kill myself.
Same. Oh, is that Jeff the Killer? No, that's all Hope leaving my body, too.
Oh, yeah. The last time I remember we discussed this, we had gotten... This has caused us to go off on a bit of a tangent to talk about creepypasta in general.
Oh, that is a rabbit hole I don't think we're like, equipped to. I didn't bring my canary and spelunking here.
It's just like, if they ever did do that sort of thing, there are so many bad things to pick from like a creepypasta cinematic universe. It's almost dizzying, really. Though you mentioned like Jeff the Killer, I hope one of these days someone will be stupid enough to make my personal favorite terrible creepypasta character, Hobo Heart, which I talked to you about earlier, and I mentioned earlier, and you didn't know what that was. So I want everybody on this, listening to this, to know of the absolute terribleness that is Hobo Heart.
I mean, to be fair, I run the site, I read a lot, but, you know, in like 8 years, it'll be 8 this year, I think the site will be, I've seen so many things that I cannot remember half of them. Like, people ask me, like, what creepypasta is this? I'm like, I don't fucking know. I've deleted so many that were just, like, the chapters of Minecraft. Chapter 1, I went into the forest. Chapter 2, coming soon. I'm sorry, that was 3 sentences. I'm sorry you didn't have enough time. My brain is addled by some of the just absolute, like, when I was on UCA, Undercooked Analysis, I tricked them, I think is the appropriate word, because no sane human being should read A Meeting with Al-Qaeda. That's capital A, capital L, Qaeda.
I did not read that, and you were insistent that I read that one. Because I knew better.
It's like My Plan 9 from Outer Space. It's just something so bad you gotta fucking see it to believe it. They use commas instead of apostrophes. You doesn't seem touched by this.
All I needed to know was that singular line, and I knew exactly what I was getting myself into.
Oh my god, I would wear T-shirts with that shit on it. I love that thing. It is the best, worst thing I've ever deleted.
Worst thing you've ever deleted. There's like 100-something stories that come up on the wiki like every fucking day, isn't it?
Oh man, the abuse filter catches most of the X the Killers or .exes or Pokemon pastas that are basically the same thing or worse than we already have. Yeah, there's at least 30 that make it to the front page every day, most of which are content to stay. Some of them are Reddit, some of them are new people who actually put effort into them, and then some of them are just spam. And those are the ones I delete, because I try not to delete based on quality, because it's so subjective. I don't feel comfortable going, well, it's not scary and I don't understand it, which means nobody else is going to understand it. It's like, no, I'm going to leave this marked for review and look at it later after I have a drink.
It's that sort of thing. Is like, quality is subjective, especially when you're dealing in a medium that is just writhing and rolling and shit.
Yeah. But I think the important part is to not just, delete everything, and this is, the longest tangent one could go on.
This is the longest tangent that one could go on.
Yes, but I'm going to tell you about Hobo Heart, but first, let me tell you my favorite piece of shit. Now, okay, I'm gonna stop the train off here at Logic Central Station.
gonna get back onto the train of my off subject matter.
So tell me, who or what is Hobo Heart?
What's the best way I could describe this story?
Shit.
Yes. What's a more poignant way to describe it?
Why is he called Hobo Heart?
Because he steals hearts. That's a thing that he does.
Man, I think I've deleted at least 14 of those stories.
It's amazing because somehow, and I don't know how this is possible, but he is not only has he been popular enough to remain a thing I've heard on multiple like narration channels do stories of him, but I've also seen fan art, like lots of fan art on DeviantArt. It's that kind of shit. It is like Jeff the Killer quality kind of stuff, except slightly better written, which is not really saying much. But the reason I bring up Jeff the Killer in this is because what reading the first story of Hobo Heart feels like is like Jeff the Killer, but the weird romance shit that people try to string in with Jeff the Killer and every other thing that they write about him. It's baked in. It's baked into his backstory. It's kind of
no.
The funny thing about it is the heart stealing thing. The fact. I forgot to also mention that he has a very unique appearance, which is midnight pitch black skin with like a Grey's Anatomy like kind of skull and skeleton stuff on his body.
I think I've deleted 2 of those.
Yes, they never explain why that is.
Of course not.
They don't explain why he steals hearts or what the purpose they serve are.
Looking good, Joker.
but they do tie that in to a shitty romance plot that happens in the first story, and it's kind of amazing because it's like, oh, honey, you just wrote a really bad fan fiction
about your own character. I think I've deleted 47 of those.
Yes, and it's funny because really, it sort of like encompasses all that I believe about creepypasta, which is basically there are only like 3 routes, but possibly 4 that you could take creepypasta. I find that creepypasta just is a jumping off point for certain things. The first one being the most common one, which is that creepypasta is a jumping off point for fan fiction. Number 2, you have the actual people who are trying to using it as a jumping point for horror, because creepypasta doesn't really satisfy a lot of people's narrative desires when it comes to horror, because it's sort of like campfire stories. It's only a snippet of a story or a summary of it, really. Yeah. It's not the whole deep experience you have to kind of cut into for.
Yeah.
The third route is definitely a dark fantasy, dark science fiction. Yeah, I think actually no, yeah, that was the last one. But dark science fiction and dark fantasy, because there's quite a bit of creepypasta. I've noticed that is not very scary, but it takes the route of like just dark shit. So when it comes right down to it, it feels as though all these things are just what is a result of creepypasta anyway.
Well, you're not exactly wrong either, because like either these writers have seen something popular and they want to imitate it, they want to insert their own character or themselves into the existing mythos, or they're actual authors trying to get a foothold in an audience.
Yeah.
And then there's just the erotic stuff, which is just sit in the shower, scrubbing yourself in a cold sweat. Because that stuff's gross.
Yeah. And this is the nature of creepypasta, is that I do appreciate with like what Undercooked Analysis and a bunch of other people, they want to turn creepypasta into somewhat serious medium, but I feel there's only so far you can really go with that before you just venture out into just making something that isn't creepypasta at its core.
Yeah. I think once you transform a horror story outside of something as like a true experience, or I was in the woods and I saw a goat man, and urban legend style stuff, you sort of venture outside the realm of what creepypasta originally was. Though I think we're far outside of that bubble these days, like 10 years on.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, one of my favorite stories at the moment, which bafflingly is still considered creepypasta, is like, God, I cannot remember the actual name of it now.
Who wrote it?
I cannot. It's the Tobit series. That was it.
Yes. Banning, one of my admins.
Yeah. I was about to say banning. I just realized that it just banning and then suddenly Tobit. But yeah, that is possibly one of my favorite series, just because it's very well written and he's got some really good characters. But again, as I mentioned earlier, that it's a dark fantasy. It's not really horror.
Yeah, a lot of what I write is just straight horror, because like creepypasta is nice and all, but if you're gonna tell a story, like I don't write creepypasta really, and I say I do, but I really write short horror fiction and then longer science fiction and fantasy, because there's a lot of crossover.
There is a little bit of a crossover with that. I don't quite know who. I don't know who all outside of Slime Beast really is kind of captures what creepypasta is and actually utilizes that. Because say what you will about Slime Beast, his stories are actually kind of the example of what a creepypasta is.
Yeah, like Abandoned by Disney is this story about, it's something that seems plausible enough that you can read it and go, well, I can see that happening. Because there are those abandoned Disney or resorts and little islands where you can find rotting machinery and exposed animatronics, and like it doesn't seem that far-fetched that there's like a basement, because there is an undercurrent that runs under Disneyland and Disney World, where the tunnels where people and the actors move underneath to get to places quicker, and like it's completely plausible that something like this, like just like with say Goatman or 50-Foot Ant Story, they're all things that are plausible enough that you could tell to somebody and somebody else would believe it and then tell to them. They're campfire stories.
They're campfire stories, and they're also told from the perspective of somebody who had gone through the example, and they can't really can't explain it through like a narrative, so they just tell you what they saw.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I feel that you find in a lot of creepypasta stories now that doesn't really make it creepypasta, is that people try to have, characters and plot lines and dialogue bubbles and stuff like that, whereas, really when you get right down to it, creepypasta is just a guy on the internet telling you shit that happened to them at one point.
Yeah, like, take the example of Candle Cove. Like, that was just internet forum posts that relayed an information about the show that people thought they had seen, and then their parents were like, "Oh no, you were just watching static," and that's terrifying. To find out that you thought you were watching a kids show, and then people are like, the Mandela effect is so strong that other people actually believed that they had recalled watching something like that,
or however you choose to interpret that shit, because
yeah.
Apparently the author just has some weird interpretation of it.
And then there are other creepypasta like God, the name escapes me. Normal Porn for Normal People, where somebody actually went out and made a site based off of, from what they had written to bolster the story and make it more real. And Been Drowned
had the also that alternative reality game as well.
Yeah, the ARG that was along with that.
That's also another topic about just creepypasta in general. Really, it's just there's certain parts of it where it slips from being just the campfire stories into being like performance art.
Yeah, and that's where Slenderman really came in all of this. It was the first creepypasta that was multimedia. It wasn't just text on a page. It had images. It had a library where all documents were scrubbed and dug up photos. And so now you have this multimedia thing. And then it came into its own with like Marble Hornets, where now you have video, you have vlogs of this, and that's where I feel like creepypasta really had a paradigm shift from stories people posted and copied and pasted around the internet to performance art, where people were making videos. Now, stories could include websites like Normal Porn for Normal People or ARGs like Been Drowned, and that's where the series, that's where, not the series, but the concept of creepypasta started to evolve. And it is still an evolving genre.
It's one of those things where I don't know where you could possibly go with this past what it is already now, which is essentially waiting for someone to make a video. Because I feel as though that, like, in the sense of, like, those campfire stories, those experiences that people were a part of, that's sort of the apex of where you could go with that possibility. Is someone actually having a video and up on YouTube where people can see it, is like, this happened to me, and you know that it happened to me because you see it on there. That's the idea anyway.
The genesis of New Age creepypasta was really that YouTube shift, and now creepypasta is almost mainstream. Insofar as there was Channel Zero, that was a TV show for creepypasta. I can look at that on a shelf in Walmart and cringe because, oh my god, I am partly responsible for keeping this genre alive.
Oh god.
And now we have a movie in theaters coming out in, I think, May, the spookiest time of year.
But of course, the one thing I will say is that it's kind of a blessing and a curse for it to be as mainstream as it is, because people are aware of the genre, but they're more aware of it from the perspective of these really terrible web series.
Yeah, that's really the shame here, is that some people are going to get their first experience in creepypasta in what looks to be a generic horror story. And, you know, I feel it bad enough that, like, Channel Zero was some people's first entry into this. Like, I haven't seen it personally, but I still feel like that Sci-Fi Channel is not the place to go, oh, is this what creepypasta is? Because, I mean, Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus is also sci-fi, and I am very reserved about giving that fucking godforsaken channel a chance with a genre that I've been working to nurture by feeding shit for going on 8 years.
And I think really the big problem is that, of course, it does look like a very generic horror movie, and the big problem with just creepypasta in general, if you're not looking at, like, just looking at the stories, you're looking at, like, the video series, and the problem with those is that all these series are broken up into multiple different things. Like, let's talk about, like, Marble Hornets. That had 3 channels in itself and a Twitter account that you had to follow to properly understand what was going on throughout this whole thing. And really, I don't know about you, I don't have time for that. At least I don't anymore. I used to. That's why when I first saw it, I had all the time in the world to do that, but I don't anymore. And a movie is just something kind of more digestible. But I think, really, when it comes right down to it, the full experience of modern day creepypasta is having to look for it yourself.
I mean, to be honest, speaking of the generic nature of this trailer, if you just played the audio for me right now and I didn't look at it, you could tell me it was for, like, Ouija or any other horror movie that has come out in the last 10 years. Like, that is how baseline... They don't even... It's so just Hollywood horror that, like, I could close my eyes and lie to myself that this isn't Slenderman. This is just Oculus again.
It's... Okay, you're not wrong about that point. I will say that I feel as though, despite how generic it is, I think that there is some point where we have to admit that because of the presence of Slenderman in popular culture and all these sort of things, eventually his gimmick is going to get generic. All creepypasta gimmicks, they're going to get very generic.
I mean, they already are. And that's why we have the blacklist on the site that automatically catches anyone who's, like, X the killer in the title. Like, I mean, my favorite example of, like, how bad this is, like, there was a story where the I quote, I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but it's like, this, he played hide and seek, but this wasn't your father's hide and seek. This was hide and seek where the kids were eyeless and liverless. It's just like, everyone wants to be Jeff the Killer. Everyone wants their creepypasta OC to be Jeff the Killer, or Slenderman, or the next Ben Drown. And like, I've always held the opinion that you could do something with a X the Killer story. You just can't shackle yourself to the conventions of one. You have to do something with the concept. You can do anything with any concept. Hell, I still believe, and as terrible of an idea as it is, I still believe that there is a way to rewrite Jeff the Killer that isn't completely fucking stupid.
Oh yeah, you could easily make something out of the snippets of details that they give about the killer, about Jeff the Killer himself, like his weird catchphrase of "go to sleep." You could make an entire story that is centered around that. You could make an entire story that is just a guy who's so deformed that he went crazy.
But you can't let yourself be shackled to what the original was.
No. And that's just sort of a big problem, is that when these characters get famous, people feel the desire to shackle themselves to those concepts as if they matter. Because let's be for real, Jeff the Killer is popular, but there's nothing good that has come from it.
Do you know why Jeff the Killer is so popular among these teenagers? It's because it's a power fantasy. There's bullies and this little downtrodden kid, and he stands up to them and slices them up the brisket. You know, but that's what these copycat authors don't understand, is you can't just take what a story did, scrub the names, and write your own OC in there. Because, like, Jeff the Killer's not good, and everyone should know that. But it gave something to youth that they can look at and go, interesting. Now, why they want to fuck him crazy, that's a little beyond me.
Oh, it's because, he's so dark and edgy, and man, that apparently makes somebody's panties moist, I guess.
Oh, keep Sonic forces away from him.
Actually, it's funny enough, because I find that these iconic characters are sort of, they all share the same problem that, like, let's say a Halloween or a Nightmare on Elm Street had, where they had a good idea. They may have made a good movie out of it, but somewhere later on down the line, because of the fact it's a franchise, that someone takes the concept and just sort of misunderstands that you're not supposed to write the story where it's just the killer being the center of attention and being funny.
Yeah, like, at some point in, like, Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street, after, like, 7,000 or 8,000 movies, there's only so many times you can go, the end, or is it? And then, Jason's arm comes up, and it's just like, just kill him, and then let somebody else copycat him, and make them think that, like, Jason is back, but it's actually not. Have an actual twist somewhere in there.
It's not just a twist. It's more of like the fact that that these authors are more interested in the characters. Sorry, the monster itself, the Jeff the Killer, the Freddy, and all these sort of things. They're more interested in that than they are of making a good story around them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're talking about, like, the other characters, no, those are just the scoreboard for the entire story.
They are, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
because let's be for real, a story centered entirely around Jeff the Killer and all of his wacky shenanigans as he stabs people in the throat is not going to be that interesting to read from his perspective. But from the guy who's running away from him, that might be a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, I did.
League's interesting.
Actually, I did find a interesting Jeff the Killer story, and the thing about it is, I didn't know it was a Jeff the Killer story until the very end, because the entire thing is just centered around this guy who wants to kill this woman because she's pretty, and he doesn't. And basically, he's one of those dumpy people that get shat on by very pretty people and all that sort of stuff. And then he tries to kill her. He breaks into her house, and he walks into the bathroom where she's taking a shower because he's watched her, done all this stuff, and she's already dead. There's blood on the floor. She's decapitated and shit like that. And he freaks out and runs away, and out comes Jeff the Killer.
See, and I am going to freely admit that sounds brilliant. Because it has Jeff the Killer there at the end, but it doesn't rely on Jeff the Killer to sell the whole thing as a horror story.
Yep.
Because, and I've always thought that would be a great movie style of, you go into the theater, you have no idea what you're watching. It's just this movie that's been advertised, and then halfway through, it's Ghostbusters. Bam! Suddenly you're watching Ghostbusters, and it was Ghostbusters all along.
Yeah.
And I think that's a more powerful reveal than just having Slenderman in there from the word go.
And that is the problem with this trailer.
If this movie wasn't called Slenderman and it was just Into the Woods or something like that, and then at the end of the movie you get a glimpse of this thing and somebody goes, "That's him, the Slenderman," and then it cuts to credits. And you realize you've been watching a Slenderman movie.
Yeah.
That would blow people's fucking minds.
That'd be great. However, there was somebody, and I cannot remember who it was, but this guy who had talked a lot about marketing and what people want and the audience preferences of what makes money. And the biggest problem that audiences have is not knowing what they're going to get. It's that sort of thing where, of course, if you want to buy a Hershey's bar, you don't buy a Hershey's bar, unwrap it, and it's a Butterfinger. You don't want that. That's the biggest problem that's kind of holding back horror movies, is that they have to reveal all this stuff, because if they don't, people are going to walk out of the theater very mad or disappointed in something.
And see, that's the plain black coffee problem, where when people were asked, what kind of coffee do you like? Plain black, because that's what everyone else, that's what they thought everyone else wanted. And then, you could hand them a 2 sugar, 2 cream, and that's what they really want, but they don't know that's what they want until they have it. It's also the problem with the Prego sauce. And Jim Sterling introduced me to this concept, both of these, where there was no extra chunky Prego sauce because nobody had thought of extra chunky Prego sauce, because nobody knew that was an option for Prego sauce, and so there was never extra chunky, and Prego cornered the market, if I'm remembering this correctly. But Hollywood horror is so scared of its own shadow of moving out of the profit zone. I would hesitate to say comfort zone, because it's carved a very firm niche into that couch. But the moment somebody steps out of where you're expecting, something is great. Cabin in the Woods. That was something that I feel that, I wasn't expecting that. So I was oh great, another teen movie. And then at the end of it, it's oh, that was us.
The general thing that I keep saying is that it's not so much as that they are afraid to move out of the profit zone. It's just that it's more of again, you have people that they don't know what they want. Of course they don't know what they want. Most people will never be able to know what they want until they have it. But the problem is that you also have these scenarios, and it happens a lot in Hollywood, where they will advertise one thing, it's completely something else, and then people walk out unsatisfied. Let's say, for example, the Guillermo del Toro movie, the one where the bitch goes in that supposedly haunted mansion that turns out there was no ghost there. That was a story that people got really mad and left, and that's basically what they're afraid of. They're afraid of people basically walking out of a movie because they got something they didn't want. That's the
got something they didn't want and got something they weren't expecting. If you go into this, this is gonna be a ghost movie. clearly from the trailer it's going to be a ghost movie, and then it's just like a Lifetime drama. Nah, this is not what I wanted. This is not what I expected.
And just kind of leaves at the basically what they don't want people to basically spread word of mouth that it's not that good, or just leave bad reviews. That's really the big problem with trying to do that clever idea of giving them one thing that they expected and then not having that.
Well, in the example I gave, it would still be giving them a horror movie. It would still be about kids going missing in the woods. They're struggling to figure it out, so on and such forth. And then it's revealed at the end that what was happening was it was Slenderman. And it's still what you expected, but with a twist you never saw coming. And I think that's that's a way that Hollywood could do things that isn't, a Hollywood.
Then I can't really disagree with that statement. I don't know. All we can really do is hope, because really, what else can we really do? If they mess it up, then whatever, we expected. If they did great, then hey, pleasant surprise of the year. And I have a feeling you're gonna drag me to watch that movie anyway.
Oh God, yes. I'm not watching this alone. I don't go to bars to drink alone. I'm definitely not going to watch this shit alone.
I need someone to stand within the blast radius with me.
So I can just stare at you angrily the entire movie like, my God, is this shit for real? Are you seeing this too? Yes. Yes, I am.
Whereas I will look at you, it's like, why do you keep doing this to me?
You did this to me.
This was your fault.
Of course it was.
And I think that pretty much sums up our thoughts on Slenderman and pretty much everything else creepypasta related.
For the most part. Insofar as Slenderman, Icon Pastas, Jeff the Killer, nonsense. Shitty trailer, boring. Probably still gonna go see it because I hate myself.
You hate yourself and I have to get caught within that shit.
Like a good friend. I'm taking you down with me.
It feels less like a good friend, more like I'm being a hostage at this point.
Of course.